And to me, and I've seen this on the road, particularly covering the presidential campaigns, this repeated like dangling of temporary goods to the working class, calling them heroes and then pulling it back. The repeated lies. I mean, people forget Biden during the Democratic primary in a debate said treatment will be free for coronavirus, not just testing of this. If you are hospitalized, free. That hasn't been true. I mean, just in my life, I've talked to people that are nearly bankrupt from a week hospitalization with COVID. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. Big pharmaceutical companies increased their prices by 6% just so far this year. And to me, what I'm seeing is all of this is creating a vacuum for more people to be sucked into conspiracies, to be sucked into a right-wing, fascistic mentality under the guise of pushing back against the establishment. Can you kind of talk about, I'm just seeing this slow creeping further move right among working class people that have been so battered and bruised that they are more susceptible to that kind of message?
I think it's true. In fact, it has been a process, right? I mean, the pandemic has just exacerbated that. But even before that, we saw, I mean, Trump's first election in the first place was a consequence of the Democratic Party having completely failed to provide any kind of working class agenda. After they destroyed Bernie Sanders' chances to become the nominee, and which was a calculated effort. It's not that he lacked in popularity, that his working class program of Medicare for all, of ending student debt, taxing Wall Street, that was extremely popular. And in fact, it brought in wide swaths of people, many of whom who ended up becoming Trump supporters or just stepped out of politics, became apolitical, just felt demoralized and disenchanted from politics entirely. And so that process has already been in play for more than 4 years. And now we are seeing an exacerbation of that under Biden with their failures to have delivered on anything. And then, for many months we heard this mantra of, okay, let everything be set aside. Don't forget that they didn't win $15 an hour. Forget that they didn't deliver on Medicare for all. But Build Back Better is going to happen. And look at the shambles that's in. So I think it really shows you the failure, how the failures of the Democrats are directly tied to what working class people feel as a whole. And I do think that, as you were alluding to, there is a real danger of some really far right elements gaining ground. And in fact, we should not rule out Trump himself making a comeback. And unfortunately, this is at the doorstep of the Democratic Party. But I don't think we can only say it's the Democrats and it's Biden. Obviously, they are completely responsible for this. But we also, on the left, we also have an obligation to point out, okay, so if that doesn't work, the Democrats, putting your faith in the Democratic Party doesn't work, what's the alternative? The alternative is to build separate independent political organizations for the left, for working class people. And that is where I think that's the most difficulty, in the sense that a lot of good people, well-meaning people have in the past years, in the last 4 or 5 years, put their faith in progressive Democrats, progressives like Pramila Jayapal and AOC and the rest of the squad members. And we've seen that strategy does not work. I mean, I don't care how well-meaning some of them might be, although I don't accept that all of them are well-meaning. But even if you assume that, the fact is that this strategy of generally making peace with the Pelosi Democratic Party, but also saying, yes, I support Medicare for all, and sometimes doing some actions like the action that Cori Bush and AOC did against the repealing of the eviction moratorium, actions like that, I completely support. But the strategy of occasionally doing that, but mostly making peace with the Democratic establishment, that has failed. And that is what we have to point to, that doesn't work. And the left needs an independent political strategy in order to actually make a shift. If we want to prevent the right wing from winning, then we need that strategy. And in fact, we cannot only focus on elected officials. We have to demand that approach from labor leaders, and that is why we need a revitalization of the labor movement, not only new union drives like Starbucks, which is huge, I mean, monumentally important, but within existing unions, we need a fighting approach. We need rank and file led militant labor struggles. And we need that kind of accountability from social movement leaders also. Are you going to tie yourself to the Democrats and defend them when they repeal something like the grocery worker hazard pay? Or are you, as a union leader, as a social movement leader, going to stand with the working people who need your support?
And what does that look like? Because, there's obviously been a heated debate about Dem enter versus Dem exit. I mean, honestly, I tell people, do what's in your heart. I'm not going to try to shepherd people into the Democratic Party or out of it. But I also have to be realistic. I mean, the Green Party hasn't had much success. Movement for a People's Party doesn't have any candidates, and they've been working to build for many years. Obviously, you have things like Socialist Alternative. But how electorally, if we're basically trying to fit a square peg into a round hole with the Democratic Party, how do you build electoral power if the odds are obviously stacked against us third party wise?
Yeah, I mean, just the way you framed your question, I think I really appreciate that, because the electoral power, so to say, I mean, if you want to call it electoral power, you cannot build that separate from mass movements. I mean, it has to be tied to that strategy. So ultimately, it would be pointless for us to talk about individual campaigns, although I do have something to say about individual campaigns. It does matter what kind of campaigns and candidates you run. But setting that aside for a second, just to explain the underlying idea that it's not possible to run electoral campaigns by themselves that are divorced from the larger strategy of how we are going to make social change possible. And that larger strategy does involve all those things that I just mentioned. For example, when we have social movements like Black Lives Matter, what are the demands we are going to put forward as a movement? What are the requirements we will have for leaders to be accountable to the movement? Meaning, what is it that actually we want to win from this movement in order for the lives of our Black community members to be improved? That's an example. If we're talking about the labor movement, then we're talking about, do we have a leadership in our labor unions that is willing to fight, like, for example, the West Virginia teachers fought back? Is it willing to put forward that kind of strategy which unifies all the rank and file together and demands accountability from leadership, and a rank and file led movement that is even willing to openly defy union leaders when they sell us out? That's important. I mean, we just saw some of that play out in the carpenter strike in the Pacific Northwest. The workers didn't win everything they want to win. I mean, we have to have a sober reflection. But what is important to note is that the rank and file did experience a little bit of that feeling of standing up to the leadership that has sold them out, and the leadership sold them out spectacularly. In fact, the aftermath of that struggle has been that the entire leadership of the Pacific Northwest Carpenter Council has been forced to resign because they were exposed in all kinds of wrongdoing. So I think there are glimmers of hope where we know that workers are ready to fight back. The incredible union drive of Starbucks Workers United shows that there is a whole layer of millions of young people who not only want to unionize, but are ready for that fighting approach. What's lacking, principally what's lacking, I'm not saying everybody's on the same page at all times, but what I'm saying is what is principally lacking and has been lacking is that kind of leadership. And so back to your electoral question, we need a new party for the working class, absolutely. And and that's why myself and other members of Socialist Alternative, we say it like that. We don't claim to be the new party. Socialist Alternative has played an important role, and we want to continue to play that important role, but we need a much bigger platform for working class people nationwide if we are actually going to present a challenge to the Democrats. But it's not going to happen in a vacuum. I mean, when Bernie was running, even both in 2016 and also in 2020, we said, Socialist Alternative publicly said that, one, it is important for him to run through the end of the general election as an independent. Even if the Democratic Party throws him out, he has to run as an independent. He didn't do that. He disagreed with us on that. We also said that coming out of that election, win or lose, he should help establish a broad-based organization that can be rooted in ordinary people's lives, really play a role in ongoing struggle, and then coming out of that struggle, we can build electoral campaigns as well. That didn't happen. So in other words, what I'm saying is that no one campaign can do it, but we have to go in that direction. And I'll say this one last thing. A lot of people on the left, and I get asked this question a lot, that, oh, don't we need hundreds of candidates that will call themselves socialist in name or whatever? And look, yes, that would be fantastic, but it is not what you call in name. AOC called herself socialist in name, but that strategy didn't work. And here's what I would say. What we have shown through Socialist Alternatives approach in Seattle is the lesson. And I don't say it because it's my organization. I'm saying it because that is the correct way to do it, because we have proven over 8 years that this works. You can actually mobilize and organize working people on a fighting strategy. We didn't invent it, but we've demonstrated it in these years. And that's what's important. There's a long history behind it. And so even if we had one single congressional campaign, for example, election campaign, that was run on this basis, on a fighting platform where you were not worried about your relationship with Nancy Pelosi or Chuck Schumer or whoever, but you ran to fight, and in the process you could win. But even if you didn't win, and look, we have won 4 times, so we have shown that you can win. But even if you didn't win, what you would do would be far more important, which is show the example of a right kind of campaign.
Thanks for watching, and make sure to tune in to Status Coup's daily live stream Monday through Thursday at 5 o'clock Eastern Time and Fridays at 4 o'clock Eastern Time.